I always say when I characterize the relationships that South Africa has with Guinea Conakry, that it is not a relationship that was born out of memorandums in conference room, but it is a relationship that was born out of sweat and blood in the battlefield. Because when it was not fashionable, during the dark days of apartheid, it was this country that gave our leaders training. President Nelson Mandela, Gov, they trained in Kenya. Fortunately, in December, I visited the place where they trained. The stone where Gov used to sit when he had his meal is still there, is preserved. And except that, before we attained our freedom, it was this country in the same Kenya where they trained some of the contingents of APLA to prepare them for integration into the defense force. You might know General Mabanga, who was the spokesperson.
I know him very well.
General Mabanga, actually now I just came back from home. I was in a DIRCO workshop and I met General Mabanga. And I didn't know, because when I visited there, they said, no, there are people, South Africans who trained here, and they took me behind a tanker. We know these graffitis people have written, I was here, and they wrote their names, and you could see their South African names. Now, General Mabanga, when he heard that I'm in Conakry, he said, yeah, but that's where I did my infantry training, my basic training, and conventional training. And now that was a discovery that the contingent of APLAs who trained here as Guineans are there in South Africa. But except that, when Mama Miriam Makeba was declared a pariah by both South Africa and the US, it was this Sekotore himself who gave Mama Makeba a home. If you can see the pictures of how Mama Makeba, without documents, with Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, when they came here, they were received the way they were received. There was big entourages. But if you look at the community, Mama Makeba was a mama next door. How they talk about it. You know, there are so many things that when I went to Dalaba, I realized I did not know about Mama Makeba. But how the communities reconnect with their past and identify themselves with Mama Makeba. But let me come closer to the current situation. South Africa is a mining country. Guinea is a mining country. There's lots of skills that we can share than standing, idling and watching Eastern countries and Western countries
tapping into our resources,
into the resources, and we being bystanders and watchers. History will never forgive us. I think if South-to-South solutions, African problems need African solutions, and by interacting, strengthening our connections, I think from the mining perspective, from the IT, MTNs, all those companies, there is an immense potential. If you look at, I went to a place called Tenene, and there are some South African family of farmers from the Free State. Once you enter that place, it was a bush. Once you enter it, you feel you are like in South Africa. The watering system, the foods they produce there, in those hectares and hectares of land, is great. So the sources, all the rivers of West Africa, most of them, they originate from Guinea. So this country has a potential to be the food basket of the whole of West Africa. But let's come back to the lecture now and its relevance. I think for Thabo Mbeki Foundation, led by the patron President Mbeki himself, to come to Guinea, including UNISA, with all the delegation, including SABC, Newsroom, Africa 702, Radio 702, all those coming here. To me, it happens during an African month. This lecture is taking place in Guinea during an African month. Sekotore is the founding father of the OAU. So it's not by accident that Guinea has been chosen as a place. This is the blessed place. Because remember, We saw President Mbeki going to lay a wreath where Amilcar Cabral was shot. Sekotori, we visit Mama Sekotori. If you look at this lecture, how it reconnects Guinea, allowing it to reflect in the mirror and say, hey, how are we expediting this transition? Because I always argue and say, when you look at these coups, they always have their origins. I think if we did not have a third term of President Alpha Conde, we would not have had a coup. You see? So there were conditions and people ended up, you know, some opposition leaders ended in prison, others died in prison. So there were tensions, obviously, when we arrived here. When the coup happened, we saw people happy. Some, of course, there were sections that were not happy. So there are mixed feelings. But then, I guess when we have scholars and statesmen renowned for the renaissance of Africa like President Mbeki, it does give hope to the general populace. It carries a correct message, because if we don't become, we shouldn't be bystanders. But and we are not breaking any sanctions. I think there is, I can't remember whether it's section 2 subsection D or whatever of the OAU allows engagements as long as we're not condoning, but it is an engagement and say the people of Guinea also want peace, also want a democracy. And this lecture, I think it is given by a Guinean scholar. The child who understands, the child of the soil. And therefore I think this is an opportune moment that we are here.
You as diplomats, you get posted in different countries. I know I met you 6 or 7 years ago. You were in Uganda, a better country compared to what is happening here now. How important it is for influential Africans not to neglect countries that are going through tough time. I mean, when you look at Guinea, when you compare it to South Africa, to Kenya maybe, I mean, right now, much as the country is rich in terms of mineral resources, how important is this kind of engagement? Not at the political level, it is almost at people to people or person to person, you know, lecture.
Well, I think there are no words I can use to describe the importance, but it is very, very important. It is important because how then do we operationalize the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? We talk of a country that is endowed with resources. We talk of a country that also has experienced South Africa in mining and other industries. This is an African country that we should help each other as Africans. Therefore, it is very important because when we look people to people, we share skills. People upskill. We have UNISA here. At an academic level, now there is an understanding of exchanging of student common researches. At a cultural level, you know, when Jerusalem, that song was saying, I was driving in town and I saw Jerusalem placard. You know, at a cultural diplomacy level, you see, what is it that we do to exchange this thing? Now we have Simpiwe Dala here, who will be playing here in memory of Mama Makeba. Mama Makeba herself has taught us how important that diplomacy of culture is. And therefore, it is important that we keep on engaging. It is important because we cannot realize this whole issue of having African solutions for African problems if we are far from each other. Nature doesn't allow any space. But if there is a gap and we stand aloof as Africans, somebody will occupy that gap, and obviously they will further put us apart. Let us draw closer, find ways, rules of engagement so that Africa can also experience peace. really we must work hard to ensure that the dream of silencing the gun does become a reality.